Hi, welcome to the BU and Be Real podcast. I am your host, Nathan Daniel. I am excited that you're here, and this is chapter one. Our episodes are going to be titled as chapters because this is a show all about hearing stories of people's lives. One thing I found through my years and through my experiences is that the way I see the world and the way that I see individuals in our world today is that we're like books. All right. Like if you've ever experienced a manuscript, if you've ever seen a first edition copy of a book, you know how rare they are. And at the end of the day, what I look at when I see people is I see something even more precious than a first edition manuscript. What I see is a story that sometimes is not told. I see a story that people get stuck in and they get a little afraid of sharing with the world. And so this podcast I started was to help with that. I want to help people tell their stories. I want to help people share their stories so that in the future there's a legacy, right? There are lessons that we learn each and every single day that could impact somebody else's life that we never even know. I'll give you an example of this. This was in 2020, January of 2020. I was sitting in an airport and COVID had just started coming out. I don't watch the news and I hadn't heard anything yet about COVID. And what I realized was there's thousands of people. There's this fog storm in Chicago and I'm due to be on stage speaking the next day at an event. And this massive fog storm comes in and it grounds all planes. And so all of a sudden there's flight cancellations. People are like staying in the airport. And I'm looking around and people are living on their phones, right? They're constantly looking down, whether they're reading, they're watching a movie, they're listening to music, and they're not engaging with the people around them except with their, of course, personal family and everything else. And, I'm walking around watching all of this happen and it clicked in my brain. And I said, why? Why are we living in a world where we look down versus facing one another and having conversations? And so I put my phone down because I was guilty of it as well. And I turned to the person next to me and I said, struck up a conversation. And those of you that know me, one of my favorite scripts, if you know what a script is, right? One of my favorite scripts is hello, because it starts a conversation. And so I started a conversation with a gentleman. His name was Mike. And, I asked him about his story. I said, what do you do? Where are you from? Are you coming or going? Like all these questions. And it started spurring a conversation. Of course, he turned back to me and allowed me to tell my story. And as I shared my story with him, all of a sudden, total stranger, mind you, I'm sitting right next to, starts tearing up. And he's like, Nathan, your story is what you've gone through this last year is exactly the moment that I'm in right now. And he said, thank you. Thank you for spending the time. Thank you for saying hello. And I appreciate it. And so from that point, he got on the plane. Like we finally had an opportunity to get up and get on our prospective planes and take off. And I realized in that moment, we have to stop. We have to hear one another's stories and we have to tell our own story. And so since that moment, I was like, we've got to have an outlet. There's got to be a medium. There's got to be a place for this. And it started here. And I'm like, we've got to start a podcast. We're going to start a show. And it's called the BU and Be Real podcast. And so let me tell you what BU and Be Real means to me. BU and Be Real means authenticity. It means being yourself constantly, not being afraid of what the world is pushing at you, but living your authentic life, living your truth, living in your joy, living in your passion, and consistently doing that and not being ashamed of your story. You see, one of my coaches a while back, her name is Denise, she asked me 3 questions. And the first question that changed my world, and I'm going to tell my story in another chapter, but today I'm just really telling the whole point of this podcast. But she asked me 3 questions, and I want you to remember these. And I write them down, and I have them on my whiteboard in my office. And the first question is this: what do I love? What do I love? The second question is, what if I could? And the third question is, what if it were easy? And by asking yourself these questions on a consistent basis, are you living in your joy? Are you being truthful to yourself? Because honestly, if you're not right in your heart, you'll never be right with the rest of the world. And so this show is to help with that. It's to hear the stories of people, extraordinary people, whether it be a single mom or parent raising multiple kids and working multiple jobs. There's a story there. Whether it's, and I've got some amazing guests coming up I'm so excited about. But if it's somebody extraordinary that has, an amazing business, or maybe they're a great artist, or whatever their story is, as I travel, as I have conversations with people, I'm going to be bringing them on the show. And I hope you enjoy this, and I hope you take away. And if there's anybody that you want to hear on this show, if there's a story that wants to be told, or maybe you would like to share your story, I'm opening it up to help people do that. So this is it. This is the Be You and Be Real podcast. I'm excited that you're here. I hope you join us on our journey as we dive in to future chapters ahead.